Hi friends, today's episode is a little different. I've been deep in thought, as I'm sure many of you have been also, reflecting on all that's happened recently. I want to share some of what I've been thinking about, particularly as it relates to why I care so much about raising livestock, healthy food, and self-sufficiency, as well as what's coming up for our ranch, the meat business, and the podcast. Let's get to it. Hey friends, welcome to the Get Goat-Wise podcast. Are you longing to raise goats and other animals for food but don't know where to start? Do you want to be more self-sufficient and less dependent on the grocery store? Do you wish you had a mentor to walk you through raising livestock? Hi, I'm Millie, animal scientist, cattle girl turned goat rancher, co-owner of Dry Creek Livestock, and simple living enthusiast. For 15 years, I've been on a mission to raise all of our own meat, eggs, and dairy. Here, we'll talk about raising goats and other homestead livestock, how to create sustainable animal management systems that actually work, and a bit of off-grid life with kids and livestock. If you're ready to take control of your food supply, raise livestock with confidence, and provide your family with the most nourishing meat, eggs, and dairy available, you're in the right place. Kick off your muck boots, pour a cup of coffee, and let's talk livestock. Hey friends, this is episode 75 of the Get Goat-Wise podcast, and before we know it, we'll be at 100 episodes. I'd love to celebrate that milestone by hitting 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts. Right now, we're at 52, so we need 48 more to get there. If this podcast has encouraged you or helped you, would you take just 30 seconds to leave a review on Apple Podcasts? Search Get Goat-Wise, scroll down to Ratings and Reviews, click on the purple words that say Write a Review, and then give me some stars and tell me what you think. It helps more families discover the show, which means we can help more people raise livestock with confidence and take control of their food supply. And that's what this is all about. I'd appreciate your review. Here's what's happening on the ranch. We had a good frost last week, and it won't be long before we're waking up to frost every morning. We're still moving electric fence daily. Once we start freezing every night, we'll have to shift our fence moves to later in the day after the ground warms up. It's easy enough to get posts in the ground when we've had a light frost, but it's not so easy to get them out. So we'll have to work around that soon. The roosters are sorted off, and we've got someone who's interested in taking them, so that should happen in the next week or two. The new barn cats are living their best life. They're getting friendlier, but staying smart about the dogs, and they look forward to their milk treat every evening. That gives me one more reason to keep milking for a while longer. The bigger kitten comes right up to the milking stand, and I conveniently squirt a little milk on the rubber mat so she can lick it up. We'll be good friends before long. This week will be the last week of our local farmers market. If you're local, come say hi and let me know if you'd like me to bring anything specific. The Weston A. Price Foundation is holding their annual conference in Salt Lake City this year in October, and we've applied and been accepted to do a booth with the goat meat. If you're attending, I hope I'll see you there. It's been an introspective week for me, as I'm sure it's been for most everyone else. So I'm going to stray from my usual content and talk about how I ended up here and why I'm doing what I'm doing, and what you can expect from me in the future. My first recollections of animals and livestock are from the family ranch. I remember the smell of ear tag ink filling our house as my mom and dad would carefully write out tags, let them dry, and then organize them on the tag board every spring for calving season. I got to go to the dairy barn and see Spot and Speckle, the last two Holstein cows on the ranch, being milked. We spent summers up at the range, as we called it, first living in an old trailer and then a cinder block house that felt like a mansion when we moved in there. There was no power, but we had generators and lanterns, and those are some of the fondest memories of my childhood. There were lots of rattlesnakes up there, and I remember the rules. No running and stay on the trails so you can see where you're stepping. That must have been scary for my mom to have 3 young kids, trying to keep us from getting bitten by poisonous snakes. My mom was trying to grow a lawn. It was a very dry summer, and a rattlesnake came to drink out of the sprinkler. The baby grass was just an inch high, and my mom threw giant cobble rocks at that snake until she destroyed her beautiful baby lawn. Ultimately, she shot the snake. Maybe she should have done that first. The whole family went along on fence projects and windmill repairs, but my favorite days were when I got to ride horses and help with cows. When I was 8, we left the family place and my dad went to work as the cattle manager for a big ranch nearby. I didn't understand the magnitude of that ranch until I was older, but that was where I spent my summers horseback behind a big herd of cattle and really started to watch and learn. My dad would take me along on shipping days, which always seemed to start in the darkness of early morning. At one point, the ranch even had bison, and that was fascinating. I got my first chickens, painted white fences and red barns, and mowed a lot of lawns as a kid. It was a pretty amazing childhood. Space to roam, horses to ride, and kids to play night games on cool summer nights. It wasn't uncommon to saddle a horse in the morning and just take off riding wherever we wanted to go. As long as we were home before dark, everything was fine. My dad wasn't afraid to try new things in his job, and sometimes those things didn't work out very well. Maybe that's where I first started to understand that it's only a failure if you didn't learn something. One year, the ranch invested in breeding heifers using artificial insemination. And I'm not sure exactly what happened, whether the bull was a bad choice or if the straws got mixed up, but come calving season, it was a disaster. The calves were huge, and a lot of the heifers needed help. The end result was a lot of bottle calves, some with broken legs from the necessary force of the pull. The broken legs were casted, and it was a crazy amount of work trying to keep everything alive and fed. I think there were 25 or 30 calves. We were mixing up milk replacer in 5-gallon containers and teaching calves to drink out of buckets as soon as they were able. It was just too much to try to bottle feed that many calves with just a few people, most of us kids. In the end, we kept most of them alive and even healed up quite a few broken legs. Funny, I actually remember some of their names: Bert, Peanut, and Lucky. Those were 3 of the broken-legged calves that we spent the most time with. Over the years, my interest in ranching grew, and I had a deep appreciation for rural life and the men and women who do this work of feeding people. I became more attentive to all aspects of the ranch business, but the cows had my heart, and I started to look into animal science programs. I was in high school when my dad was promoted to general manager. By this time, he'd become very respected and well-known in the industry, especially when it came to grazing and range management. He wasn't afraid to do things differently, and what he and the people he worked with had accomplished as far as range improvement was astonishing. He documented it well on paper and with photographs, and he spent a lot of time traveling and sharing what they'd done and the improvements they'd seen. If I remember correctly, at that time the ranch was running about 6,000 cows. They'd added in water systems and fences to make intensive grazing possible and effective on the ranch. I got very focused on academics to make sure I could earn scholarships to pursue my education in animal science, and I ended up going to Colorado State University. I thought I wanted to focus on genetics, so I got a job in the DNA laboratory, and that's when I realized I didn't want to focus on genetics. I kept trying out different work-study jobs in the animal science department and absolutely loved working in animal nutrition in the animal metabolism laboratory. A close second was meat science. As I dove deeper into nutrition, I found that macronutrition in range cattle was my passion, and I was happy to leave the micronutrition, the minerals, to someone else. I had so many amazing opportunities at CSU working with different species, radioactive residue tracing, and even helping with the build of the first full animal metabolism chambers for cattle, all experiences I'm so grateful for. Once I finished up at Colorado State, I went on to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln to do my master's degree in ruminant nutrition. My research project ended up being long and all-encompassing. cows, calves, yearlings, all the way through the feedlot, and even carcass data. At the time, it was overwhelming, and I felt like I'd never finish. But after 2 full years of research, lab work, and data analysis, I got to see the whole thing come together, and it was so rewarding. While I was working on my own research, I helped other graduate students with theirs, and I learned even more about all kinds of specialties, especially related to cattle. I'm so grateful for the experiences I had in college, the professors who invested their time in me and trusted me with their research. I was surrounded by good, supportive mentors, and that was amazing. I'd been accepted to a few different doctorate programs, but I decided I needed to take a semester to recalibrate my priorities before I jumped into another 3 to 4 years of college, and I'm so glad I did. Right after I graduated, 9/11 happened, and I think everyone was examining their priorities, so I wasn't alone. I never did go back for that PhD. I met my now husband. Actually, I knew who he was, but I'd never really talked to him. We hit it off, and that started a whole new chapter of my life. Fast forward, I worked in extension for a while, spent some time doing research for the U.S. Sheep Experiment Station, and then we started a family, and I was able to stay home and raise my babies. And that started the cascade of questioning everything I'd ever learned. Some things held up to the scrutiny, and some did not. I made my own baby food, cloth diapered, and by my second child, I was questioning the ever-increasing vaccine schedule for babies. And shortly after he was born, I went all in on researching food additives and how they affect our health. I solved my own health problems by eliminating FDA-approved food additives, which then made me question all the other food-related stuff the FDA said was safe. We spent 7 years away from employment in agriculture and ranching while my husband worked in the oil field, and then we decided we'd rather be broke and happy in agriculture. So we went back to the ranch jobs, and the kids got to go along. We were finally giving them the childhood we wanted them to have. Our place in town had a couple of acres, and we had horses for my husband's job. He was the lead range rider for a large grazing association here for almost a decade. And during that time, my kids started raising 4-H livestock projects, and that's when we got our first goats. We started with show goats, and 1 year in, we started our commercial meat goat herd, which has always been where my heart is. I like looking at really nice show animals, but my real passion lies in commercial production, specifically in optimizing livestock and resources to produce meat while improving land. 2020 was a turning point for everyone. For me, as I watched store shelves sit empty and the fragile nature of our food supply exposed, it reinforced the importance of good food, raising it yourself if you can, sourcing it well if you can't, maintaining a usable and functional food storage that rotates out food to avoid waste, and taking control of your food supply. I doubled down on my efforts to make food storage as easy and functional as possible. 2020 also made me take a long, hard look at our management systems. It showed us where we were too dependent on outside inputs and inspired change in the way we raised our livestock to eliminate or at least reduce unnecessary outside inputs. That was the year the goats went grain-free. Over the past 8 years, I've poured my time into learning everything I can about goats, researching, testing, trying different things, and using my research experience to dial in commercial meat goat production in the high desert. I've learned that goats are much more like cattle and less like sheep, and that research on cows tends to apply fairly consistently to goats. Though we don't raise show goats anymore, that herd and my mentors gave me a rapid education on goats, and I was able to use those years to learn how to handle goats, identify and solve goat problems, formulate our mineral, and so much more. If you're familiar with show stock, you'll know what I'm talking about. If there's a problem that a species can have, show stock will teach you all about it. About 5 years ago, we bought raw land from my parents. We put in a livestock water system, added some fence, and it didn't take long before we decided that we didn't want to be split over 2 places anymore. So we started working toward moving out here and selling our house in town. Now we're here, living the off-grid life, slowly building everything ourselves while running the ranch and the fencing business, and it's hard, but it's worth it. Since we've had the goats over here, intensive rotational grazing has been priority, and the improvement in the land is evident. I'm very excited about where we're going with that, and I'll share more as we gather data and see more results. And I'm sure I'll share some things that don't work out too, because that's the nature of ranching and trying new things. We've been grazing cattle for another rancher since we bought this land, which has been a good arrangement for them and for us. We wanted to add our own cows, but it was just too big of an investment to go buy cows. After the hard winter of 2022-23, the local ranchers had one of the hardest calving seasons I can remember. It was cold, the snow was deep, and calves were dying all over the place, getting frostbite, losing ears, tails, and even feet. I was milking goats, and we were contacted by a couple of ranchers to please take some bottle calves. They were overwhelmed and couldn't keep up, just trying to keep things alive. And that was the modest beginning of our cow herd. The 2 heifer calves we kept from that first year had calves this spring, which was very exciting. We've built a tiny cow herd raising bottle calves. That's the background story of where I came from and how we ended up where we are. So, what are the future plans? On the ranch, we have a long list of unfinished projects that we're working on, but fence is a priority as we've outgrown our infrastructure for the goats. We plan to increase the cow herd and use the goats and cows to complement each other both in grazing strategies and financially. The herd sizes of each will vary depending on the market, available forage, and fencing. As far as the meat business, we'll be focusing primarily on goat meat for now, promoting and shipping that. We'll still have beef and pork, but that will primarily be pre-order for the foreseeable future. I may keep a small amount of inventory for farmers markets, but that's still undecided. Here on the podcast and on Dry Creek Pastures and Get Goatwise, website updates are underway, and Dry Creek Pastures will be the umbrella brand for the ranch, Dry Creek Heritage Meats, and Get Goatwise. You'll start to see more resources on the website that will help you in your livestock raising and self-sufficiency goals. There are quite a few things in the works, and this winter, at least some of those will be available as I'm able to devote more time to computer work. Once I get through the learning curve of getting those first resources out to you, I expect that more will quickly follow. I'm also looking at shipping physical products, things I talk about on here that might not be available where you are, specifically goat mineral and possibly eye patches, which are not commercially available, but when you need them, you need them. I'd love to hear from you and what would be helpful for you. So if you have requests or ideas, please send me an email, millie@drycreekpastures.com. My goal is to help you with information and resources that make raising livestock, homesteading, and self-sufficiency doable by breaking everything down into simple steps and providing the resources you need to succeed, take control of your food supply, and be less reliant on the food system. I'd love your input on this, and if you have any questions, come on over to the community and start a conversation. That's at getgoatwise.com/community. Thanks for being here. I'm truly grateful for you. See you next week. Hey there. Thanks for listening today. I'm so glad you're here. If this episode helped you or encouraged you in some way, share the link with your homesteading friends. And if you really want to help me out, click on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. You can connect with me on Instagram or email linked in the show notes, and meet me back here soon for more Get Goatwise.